So for more on COVID-19 and the new variant, I'm joined now by Jason Kindrachuk. He is a research chair for the Department of Microbiology and Infectious Diseases at the University of Manitoba, and he is here to answer your questions. Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's start with this question that we got from Kim. She says she is very curious to understand how the COVID virus evolves. Is this virus, she asks, changing to better its chances of infecting and thriving in humans?
Well, one of the things we have to think about as the virus is mutating is that this is not a conscious effort on behalf of the virus to adapt to the new environment, right? When we think of mutations in viruses, we have to appreciate these are random events. And what will happen is that if these random events result in a mutation that allows the virus to better proliferate or better transmit to other people or move through the environment, that will then start to supersede other variants that are circulating. So, you know, when we think about this idea of the evolution of the virus, we really have to appreciate that much of this is unfortunately based on chance. Certainly, we drive some of that with, with things like chronic infections, or certainly even the potential for the virus to move out into different species. But those mutations will accumulate over time, and that's why we keep talking about this idea that trying to reduce transmission as quickly as possible will help alleviate the emergence of new variants.
Okay. Next question here is from Lib S, who wants to know, how did they discover this new variant of concern, and how do they know how far it has spread?
It's a great question. So listen, we have to have an unbelievable thank you and debt of gratitude to our South African colleagues for picking up on this variant. So certainly there was some epidemiological evidence that was suggestive that there was something new going on, right? So the epidemiological curves were starting to increase, and thankfully they have very, very good genome sequencing efforts in South Africa. They've already identified data in the past for us, and they picked up on this brand new variant that had emerged. They were able to identify that there were all these mutations within the spike protein that were associated with this, and that then allowed the South Africans to get that information out to the rest of the globe. And that provided us with the means of being able to identify new ways to be able to diagnostically track this virus in other communities. So you're starting to hear about cases that are picking up across the globe or that are being picked up. A lot of this is because of the efforts of our South African colleagues that did this initially.
So essentially, is there, that information is passed around to health organizations or agencies around the world, and that way there can be sort of a comparison that's done when processing tests in labs?
Absolutely. Listen, all of us that are involved in COVID response and research efforts have been probably, up for the last 5 days straight because of the fact that we're all globally connected, and that includes our research community. So we are sharing information in real time back and forth across continents to try and help drive our surveillance efforts, but also the research efforts to figure out what Omicron is.
Okay, now we've got this question here from Daniel S., and it has to do with travel restrictions. He's asking, should international flights worldwide be canceled?
This is a great question, right? So we get back to this idea of what can we afford to lose while trying to gain ground and traction on Omicron. The first thing we have to appreciate is that we are focused on Omicron, but we have Delta circulating widely across our communities and still putting a lot of people in hospitals and unfortunately claiming a lot of lives. So we can't lose sight of what we're already dealing with Delta. The vaccines continue to hold up very, very well. We certainly know that with Omicron circulating, we have to pick up our diagnostic efforts. I don't think we can get into a point where we start to look at banning all travel, because the simple fact is we don't yet know where Omicron all is found across the globe. And certainly it's not just a continent of Africa issue. This is a global issue now, and we don't really know where it first emerged. So I think we're back to this idea of trying to do targeted surveillance and trying to get people to get vaccinated and get vaccine equity met across the globe.
Okay, now this next question, I'm actually going to put two questions together so that we can bring those up together as well. So this is from Natanya, wondering if everyone coming into Canada needs a negative PCR test to get into the country. How did Omicron cases get here? And I also there's a question here from Matt also saying, does the PCR test pick up the virus in people with no symptoms? And maybe if I can sort of put those together for you.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, right? So one of the things we have to think about is the fact that when we're dealing with an infection, we don't get infected and the virus suddenly rises to a really high level at once. The analogy I can use, it's kind of like fishing with a fish finder. If you go out and you're able to find one fish in an area of a lake, if you throw your hook down, you might get a bite, you might not, but the chances are probably pretty slim. If you have an entire school of fish, you're probably going to pick something up. And that's one of the problems that we have, is that in those early periods of infection, we may not be able to actually pick up the virus with the sensitivity of the assays we have. They're very, very sensitive, but there is a lower limit of detection. So what we need to do is that we appreciate that negative test tells us at that point in time that person may not be infected or they may not be able to transmit yet, but a day later, or a couple days later, if that person becomes symptomatic or we retest, we may actually pick up some virus. And that's important for us to go back and try and identify where that is. And that really goes back to this idea of why Omicron showed up here. You could have people that present with no symptoms, but because they've traveled and they've been infected during that period of time, and they are not yet showing symptoms, or the virus has not yet met that level of detection limit, they may show up negative, but then become positive afterwards.
Okay, and this next question here is from Carolyn M., and she works for a company that does regular rapid antigen testing with its employees, and here's her question. I'm wondering if the rapid tests we use are able to detect the variant virus, as this test was developed for the original COVID variant.
This is a great question. So certainly within our own, coronavirus variants rapid response network here in Canada, and of course other networks across the world, we've all been asking the same question of what does this mean for our antigen tests? There's been some European data that's come forth that has looked at different rapid antigen tests that are used there that actually looks very, very good in the fact that they're able to pick up Omicron still. We have to validate across all of the different antigen tests because they all, potentially use a different particular portion of the spike protein for their particular test. But I think right now that there is at least quite a bit of comfortability that the virus has not changed so much that the antigen tests will not pick it up. But we need time to validate it. And of course, that also goes back to us needing reagents and certainly needing virus to be able to do these assessments very, very quickly.
Okay, and we have time only for one last question. This is from Fern, asking about travel, and she says that I was booking a trip to the UK for June 2022, but with this new variant, should I put that trip on hold for a bit longer while we await the latest data on Omicron, or purchase cancellation insurance and fingers crossed for my next booster in the next few months?
Yeah, the easy answer is yes. Probably be considerate of the fact that the situation is developing right now. Certainly, we're seeing that international travel is being discouraged by WHO. Probably best to be cautious at this point. Let's see what Omicron is and what happens in the coming few days and weeks, and then we'll be able to make a better assessment of how this looks for hopefully the months ahead.
All right. Thank you so much again for your time. That, again, was Jason Kindrachuk from the University of Manitoba. Thank you.
Thank you.